This is High Vibe TV, the uncensored, guided, and community-based video TV network with content recorded and live streamed from the world-famous High Vibe TV studios. High Vibe TV delivers daily, weekly, and special programs focused on astrology, spirituality, history, community, and more. This is not your run-of-the-mill astrology and tarot. This is the future of spirituality, illuminating new ways the collective can step into the dawning of this exciting new dimension. The highest vibe is truth, and the truth always prevails. Download our awesome app on the Apple and Android stores so you don't miss our notifications, with special spiritual insights curated to the energy of the universe. Search for us on your TV with our exciting TV apps on Apple TV and Roku. Catch our vibe on your computer, where you can join in on the live chat with our amazing community and blog. Watch spirituality like you've never seen before. Download our apps or go to highvibe.tv. Subscribe now.
And I think this picture is a good way to look at it, with the zodiac above, of course, and, you know, a sick person. And, you know, of course, we see this in your hospital elevators to even your elevator in your apartment building. We are still using a lot of the symbolism that is brought from astrology and Hermeticism and even ancient Rome and Greece. But also it's the doctors at the time, which look very, like could be Nostradamus. I mean, they look very similar.
It could be.
But the influence of the zodiac with scholars in this undated 17th century engraving. But the idea of trying to show the powers of the celestial bodies and the planets in them and their influence on the person going through the moment of their life. There's also justice who's sitting here, that there's a divine justice to things, which is something I think we, as society, have forgotten today, that death is kind of an order of life, that there's a natural divine justice, not to say that it's negative, right? Like it's just like if you reach a certain age or your time is up by the divine justice ways of energy, it was an accepted place where today it's not. So It brings things more out of order. Or killing Jews because you think you're going to cleanse the plague of, you know, because they're outcasts or they're people that are not normal per se to the narrative. It's sad that we've lost a lot of these a lot simpler ways of dealing with things, and also maybe looking at things these ways, because I feel that this is really, you know, what somebody like me has been trying to say since the beginning of this whole pandemic. And it's the first time we've gone through such a massive worldwide pandemic. I guess you could use the 1918 one. And that didn't really go down too well. Of course, nothing went as bad as the bubonic plague, so I guess the argument could be, well, not using these ways are what are working. But I like the title of this. Before epidemiologists began modeling disease, it was the job of astrologers. And you know, I don't think we can see while we're in the middle of such intense things that are happening to humanity. It's history that will make the judgment of these things. I don't think that we can keep score at this moment, how we try to keep score in this pandemic per se, by month and by numbers of how many people have died and have not died, or how many cases there are and how many variants there are. And it seems like it's a sports game or something, whereas this was also understanding more than just what's happening cosmically to the whole earth, but how to treat people individually, uniquely to their outcomes based upon their own unique soul journey, which would have done different treatments and different things based upon the person, based upon their astrology, opposed to one size fits all to get rid of it, which if Robitussin and NyQuil really worked on every cold, I would think that it would be gone by now, but it's not.
Right. Well, very interesting comparison there. There's so many things I want to say from that. But one thing I wanted to say is that it's funny how the title of that piece is, it just says astrologers, right? It was the job of astrologers. Isn't it interesting that they are always, if we look back in the past and you see, okay, astrology was used, automatically it's like, oh, let's call them astrologers, when they were actually doctors, right?
Right.
We've talked about that before. Doctors had to know astrology because, the idea is what the individual, it's individual focused, like you were saying, it's what the individual is experiencing, and it is the individual within their environment, and something about the environment is causing distemper, and it needed to be balanced out.
Yeah.
Right? That was the idea of the medicine at this time. Never one, here is what's going to prevent you from getting sick all the time, right? I mean, yeah, there were theories of it's bad air, so you need to hold this posy that will hopefully keep the germs away. But whether or not you're susceptible to the illness, it depended on your individual constitution, right? It was what you were experiencing in your own astrology.
Yeah, and this is kind of an interesting twist. But in 1284 was also the time of Genghis Khan. Mm-hmm. And that was when he was making his great empire, the Mongolian Empire, and he was known, of course, as one of the world's greatest military commanding emperors of all time, but also a savage at the same time, too. The idea of the 1347 plague was that it came from the Mongolian Empire, the same way that in the astrology of 1284 and Genghis Khan is on the exact same time as Dante getting his beginning of understanding of purgatory and writing the Divine Comedy. Genghis Khan and his conquest of creating the whole of all of Asia, basically, in China and the Mongolian Empire, huge. And then forever, it's always said that that the plague came from the Mongolian Empire, right? And I think of today where if it's the same, you use the timing as an astrologer, like, okay, Saturn, Pluto, Jupiter, and Capricorn, ching, and Jupiter, Saturn in Aquarius, which was in 1345. Both happened in 2020. So you're like, Trump, right? So there's that whole Trump and then China, right? So some people think, oh, it's Trump and he didn't let people wear masks and it spread from Trump, or it spread from China in a lab and the Chinese were into it, but or it was Genghis Khan and his crazy Mongolian empire that he had created in those years prior, and the savage kind of energy of the idea of that man. I mean, it wasn't like, I think Pope Clement at the time or any of these bishops were ever even near a Mongolian period, let alone the idea of for context, of course, if you look at Genghis Khan, like images, right, of like his portrayal per se, right, is that he's like this great warrior, but very like scary too, right? Like, but he could also look kind of sophisticated. So it's one of those weird things of like, kind of like this scary, not so normal to a European, and also his big conquests that were in many ways putting down like Alexander the Great in many ways, because I always connect everything to Rome, right? With the Catholic Church, but also with Christianity, because it's all connected, and it's all connected in the ways of doing certain things disguised as the end of paganism, but just rebranding paganism.
All of the things you're pointing out make me realize that, at this time, we actually did talk about the plague once before. I remember we had a little bit of a talk about it on that Christmas Eve talk, right? And I remember saying then, this was early on in COVID times, right?
It was.
And I said, well, during the plague, we look back now and we can say, okay, it was the Mongols and they were spreading these rats, or it was the trade routes and the fleas were coming on the backs of the rats and the fleas had the disease and that's how it spread. But they didn't understand that at the time. They didn't see all of these things converging, right?
Right.
So not to mention, they didn't, not only nobody alive in Western Europe had ever seen Genghis Khan, but they also just didn't understand why this disease hit them, and that's part of the confusion. And so I'm thinking, right, we still don't understand what happened, right? And even now we're seeking out, I was just watching that video that Russell Brand had with the doctor or the scientist who's talking about, she early on said it was a lab leak and she's been condemned and all of that for having said that. But she's saying, look at the science. It's impossible this paper they wrote, what happened, is impossible to believe that. So that's coming out and being ignored by so many people, right? But even then, we still don't know. So,
well, and that's what's scary because I'm using Wikipedia, but Genghis Khan in his story of conquest had a fearsome reputation in local histories. Many medieval chroniclers and modern historians describe Genghis Khan's conquest as wholesale destruction on an unprecedented scale that led to drastic population declines in some regions as a result of both mass exterminations and famine. So it's like, even though he died before the 1284, he died, I think it was 1217 or 1227. And then, of course, it was his reign, though, and his family that kept it going, right? It was this Mongolian empire.
right.
And that's why I brought him up, because he's on, and it's weird, the destruction of unprecedented scale. I look at this picture, what's different from this picture than the picture of the Black Death itself? They're very similar.
Right. It's equally confusing and it hits every aspect of life. And
Yeah, because if I just, that Black Death picture, right? I mean, I don't know. Or yeah, this is it right here. Yeah, like that's the. Right? Like, even the tones a little bit. Of course, this is more European and English,
And I think the difference is, though, that the sense of destruction here, it's more like whoever's causing it isn't clear.
Yeah.
Right? There's not a so-called barbarian out there attacking the people. It's an unseen, enemy. And to me, actually, when you were talking earlier about how all these things connect, and then you brought up 1918, the flu pandemic.
Right.
Really, okay, what if we took that and connected it to the Great War, World War I, the context of the wars?
Right.
So could there have been an earlier transit that is actually the destruction of the war that, is actually like a plague of a sort?
Yeah,
that led
whenever
up to
you
it?
go into any of these big moments, they're always big outer planet conjunctions. And it depends on where they happen. And so the one that is of 1917 and the conjunctions of those 1910s didn't happen in an area that are even close to the severities of the ones of 1284, 1345. And if you think of the 1345, it's being written down as that. You have the church move to France.
Mm-hmm.
It's almost like was he a physician or an astrologer being like, this is happening, so you got 2 years?
So
You got 2 years.
The Pope had already moved, right?
But I'm just saying for preparation.
Yeah.
You have 2
yeah.
years.
Well, he's also the one who told the Pope survived, right? And he was advising the Pope. But what he told the Pope to do was to sit between two fires. And he did tell him, don't come into any contact with servants, nobody. The Pope sat there supposedly by himself during the plague with people obviously serving him. I mean, I don't know how they did it. And meanwhile, I think his, like one of his court gesture type people, but I mean, I don't know what the Pope had, but his comedian of the court died even, and all sorts of people did, but he survived. But anyway, could he also have looked at the fact that the Pope moved from Rome? Would that have affected his?
I mean, that's kind of like,
astrology?
I don't know, like that's where I think it gets a little weird if you think of 2019 and the CEOs who quit at the peak of the economy. You've never seen that before. Usually that's where you stay.
Right.
And that there was some sort of warning shot that they all left and moved to New Zealand, ironically, and bought islands in New Zealand. And then New Zealand locked down their whole country in 2020, but those billionaires on their own islands rule themselves and their yachts with their families, almost like the Pope. Kind of like,
2 fires.
With 2 fires, like I get to do whatever I want. I almost feel like there was a warning shot from the astrologer prior, because I know a lot of people think Jupiter and Saturn in Aquarius is an amazing thing. It's the home of Saturn, so it's not, and it destroys Jupiter's benevolence completely. So it's not a positive transit.
Why do people say it's positive?
Because
what do they even see?
They don't study medieval astrology.
Okay.
A lot of modern astrologers today discredit it because of the time period. And we're at a different time, so we need to evolve. But I feel like in evolution, you take all the pieces of astrology with it. So if the medieval times were in the same transits as medieval, and these are what the medieval astrologers were seeing, they were on the ground at the time, I'm going to listen to their astrology more than a modern take while I'm at a Dunkin' Donuts on my iPhone talking to my accountant about my 401k or something. That's not me. I'm just using the example of an astrologer today.
I was wondering, Dunkin' Donuts.
Right? And yeah. But like that's what's always surprised me is there's a lot of modern astrologers who are and again, the scales of justice is about in Hermetic astrology and Hermeticism is about understanding the dualistic nature of the positive and negative, that they tilt the scales all the way to positive, and what happens is eventually will happen in all forms of life is that the negative will come back harder because there's been so much weight on the negative to hold the positive high that eventually they keep pushing the positive so much that that puts all the weight to the positive and brings it down, and it slings the negative all the way up.
Interesting.
Like a sling, like an old medieval,
or like a catapult.
Catapult, exactly, of negative. So, I know we're gonna have to do a part 2 because I have to go. But I think that this is a good segue part for next week, because I feel that I think it'll make people rethink Saturn, Jupiter, and Aquarius. And when I did Rising Through the Darkness, that's the secret that I was waiting for this show to reveal, that I have never revealed. That it wasn't just the Saturn-Pluto conjunction in Capricorn, that it was the fact that I saw Jupiter and Saturn, and I went through all the Jupiter, Saturn, Aquarius transits, like in 2016, and I went, 1284 and then 1345, and we're having both of those in the same period of a year. And that's why I took the gamble or the hypothesis as an astrologer of saying that the plagues were going to show up. And that I've even said in the video, like, what's next 2020 or beyond, that the plagues aren't over. They're plagues. Nobody wants to talk about plagues. I've always said it plural. I've never said a plague. And I've said there will be a new plague, and I specifically targeted the one for 2020, but there's other ones too.
Right, and it doesn't have to be a plague exactly like the Black Death, right?
Correct.
It's a plague
that's why I just
many senses of the word.
And I used the medieval term. Yeah, I didn't use pandemic, which is a new term. I mean, plague's been used more, longer, and out of more mouths, I would say, for longer periods of time than pandemic.
Yeah. Or pestilence, should we say? I don't know what.
Yeah, and I think that's where the astrology, modern astrology, is trying to get away from medieval astrology. If you take the medievals take as an astrologer on somebody in their life, if they have a position of a planet, let's say in a negative place with a negative malefic planet to it, it's like you're going to die a horrible death, of a catastrophe of drowning, or you're going to have your head chopped off, or you're going to marry a prostitute, and you're going to impregnate a woman that you have not wed and have a bastard child who will come back and cause problems for your family for the rest of your life. Or, it's like that. So there's the Shani Nichols and the positive LGBTQ to all these different astrologers who just want to throw rainbows and clouds. And it, to me, it's like smoking weed every day. You lose your grip on reality. So,
yeah. Well, I like this idea of course, I would like the idea of the balance, sort of.
Exactly.
That it comes with the good and the bad, because there are a lot of historians, and I'll talk about this next time, who, if you survived the plague, it was a great time. If you also survived famines and all of that, it was a good time for a lot of people too, and a lot of positive developments came out of that era.
Right.
So.
Well, and I think, that'll be the best part, where we can spend more time and next Friday and go deeper, and especially some of the more interesting stories of the plague that were during that time and how people were dealing with it. And just if Brian could put this picture on, it really is there's a lot of clues in these pictures wherever you look, and there's a lot of clues using astrology or occult, or using even a lot of the hidden understandings that are everywhere. If you look at it, it's everywhere. There's not a place that you can find anywhere that, and look at how everybody's rushing into.
Oh yeah. And it's all people. It's all social groups.
Yes.
Nobody is spared.
Not
And
even
guys,
even the card tables wearing masks.
He's taking advantage. I think he's stealing over there.
Well, death is cutting the jugular out, but again, a lot of this is the shadow within the souls. This is their shadows coming after them. That really the spiritual meaning of plague, and the deeper meaning of plagues, and the way the magistrates of Rome, and even I would say astrologers of that time, would know, and maybe why that the Pope had to sit between two fires, was so that he could face his own shadows and burn them out and extinguish them out. Because really, what kills you from a plague is not so much, in my opinion, spiritually as a physical thing, but a metaphysical thing that is your own shadows that come back to haunt you, almost as the same way that your sins, if we were to use the Catholic Church, which that's what they use too, by the way, or in spirituality in today, New Age, they call it your karma, which I think is a really horrible way to put it too. That it's your shadows, and it's the things that you have built up and not released on your own, and come to truth with and honesty with, and expressed your awareness of it, and found ways to stop doing it, because it eventually comes back to get you.
This is High Vibe TV, the uncensored, guided, and community-based video TV network with content recorded and live streamed from the world-famous High Vibe TV studios. High Vibe TV delivers daily, weekly, and special programs focused on astrology, spirituality, history, community, and more. This is not your run-of-the-mill astrology and tarot. This is the future of spirituality, illuminating new ways the collective can step into the dawning of this exciting new dimension. The highest vibe is truth, and the truth always prevails. Download our awesome app on the Apple and Android stores so you don't miss our notifications, with special spiritual insights curated to the energy of the universe. Search for us on your TV with our exciting TV apps on Apple TV and Roku. Catch our vibe on your computer, where you can join in on the live chat with our amazing community and blog. Watch spirituality like you've never seen before. Download our apps or go to highvibe.tv. Subscribe now.